Good evening. My name is Brian K. Smith. I'm one of the Deans of College Counseling here at Marlborough School. We're so excited to welcome some good friends here today to talk about the college admissions process. The authors of the book, The Truth About College Admission, A Family Approach. I'm happy to welcome Brendan Bernard here today and my good friend Rick Clark. Rick, we've known each other for many, many years.
Yep.
Like way too many.
Way too many. No, they've all been good.
All been good. Well, I'm going to turn the program over to you in just a moment, but for those viewers who are online with us today, if you have questions that you want to ask of our presenters, feel free to put those in the chat. We'll do our very best to get to your questions as quickly as we possibly can. We will be concluding the program right at 8 p.m. However, if you are online and would like a copy of the book, you guys will tell them how to get a copy of that at some point in time through your presentation.
Yes.
Great.
Put a big box in your office and they all go to your office.
No, we love visitors to our office. Absolutely. All right, well, I'll turn it over to my guests.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us. This is great. I actually live in New Hampshire, so being here in Southern California this time of year is just what I need. There's snow on the ground. And so my name is Brendan Barnard. I'm the Director of College Counseling at Conn Lab School up just outside San Francisco. And you're probably wondering how I live in New Hampshire. But I work mostly remotely, but I go out there a couple times a year, actually once a month. And I also am the college admission program advisor for the Making Caring Common project, which is at Harvard Graduate School of Education, which looks at how do we raise kids who care about each other and the common good. And one of those things is, the impediments to that is often college admission, and so I kind of lead up an effort around there to address that. So, so great to be here tonight. It would be interesting just to hear kind of for the parents who are in the room what grades your children are in. So 9th grade, 10th, 11th, 10th and 11th. Okay, great. So Rick and I wrote this book, and I'll let Rick introduce himself for a while. He can talk. I'll let him introduce himself in a second. But we wrote this book because we've both done a bunch of writing in this space, and we had some shared friends and spent some time together in the summer with a group of mission leaders, kind of talking about how we can do this better and how we can serve families better, and people have been telling us both over time, why don't you just write a book? And neither of us wanted to do it alone, so here we are. And we really, the title of the book kind of says it all. I mean, we really believe powerfully in the power, very much in the power of family. However you determine that, however you describe family, whatever that means to you. And because this is not an individual process or experience, this is really a family experience, and hopefully you can enjoy it as such. So I'll turn it over to you.
Good. Well, again, great to be here. My name is Rick Clark. I am the AVP for undergrad admission at Georgia Tech, and also have the opportunity to do some writing through that role. Brendan and I also have a podcast under the same name with Truth About College Admission, and then I also work for the State Department, and I travel to embassies around the world and talk to Americans mainly about higher education in America, because as Americans, we don't realize how kind of weird the way we do college is, but it is very different than most places around the world. And so it's also a bit of an ambassadorial role, because then we talk to the contacts that Americans have made in those particular posts about, again, bringing students to the United States, hopefully for undergraduate, graduate, or even through exchange programs. So that's a little bit about me.
And I'll just interrupt because I'm looking past you at the picture of us on the.
Yeah.
We do have other clothes than these, right?
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, man, we are predictable.
No,
we look like Bert and Ernie, right? Like Only 2 outfits.
Your
Sorry,
shirt
go
is
ahead.
there. You got a different shirt, man. You didn't
Oh yeah,
tell
I
me
did.
about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I'm original.
That was pretty good. And I took the pin off my jacket.
That's right.
Anyway, we didn't take that picture tonight.
No.
Anyway. All right. Well, again, we just put together like 931 slides that we're going to burn through tonight. No. But we did have a couple things we wanted to hit on. I understand that maybe chat is open. I'm not sure how well we'll be able to get responses online. But there are some folks in the room, and so this is the audience participation part of the program. I am curious to know, when you hear the word college, you know, what comes to mind? So many, if not everybody in the room has already been to college. You think back on that experience, what are some words that come to mind? No wrong answers. As you can see, there are folding chairs in the room, and we're not going to fold you up into it if it's wrong or bad answer. So any thoughts on this?
Great experience.
Great experience. Good answer. I like it. Others?
Best 4 years of your life.
Best
Maybe
4
5
years,
or 6.
or 5 or 6. Yeah. All right, cool. That's good. That's good. What else? Anything come to mind?
Freedom.
Freedom. Great answer.
I was going to say autonomy.
Autonomy.
Instead of being without your parents.
That's awesome. Yeah, great.
Discovery.
What's that?
Discovery. Yeah.
Perfect. Yes, and you know, here's the thing. So, through my work at Georgia Tech and some opportunities to be abroad, I've asked this now in 38 states, 5 comments, and these are the answers you hear: freedom, fun, friends, excitement, discovery, learning, research. I mean, you know, like, these are big words. Most people usually, I mean, some folks in the room have masks on tonight, but normally you see people smiling. You can tell they're smiling, you know, when they give these answers, right? I mean, it's an exciting thing. So you're normal. You're normal. That's my point, is this is what people say about college. Now, we're going to add a word. College admission. What comes to mind? So again, no wrong answers, but just adding one word, what do you have?
Intense.
Intense. Okay. Others?
Panic.
Panic. Oh man. Oh yeah. I like it. Kind of. What else? These are good.
I'm excited.
Okay. Awesome. I love it. I
Good.
love it. That's great.
Stressful?
Yeah,
environment?
stressful. Stressful is like the #1 answer on the board.
But did
You
you
hear
hear
that
the
a lot.
apologetic tone in your voice, right? Like, I'm excited. Like, you're allowed to be excited.
Yeah, yeah. No. But you know, and I'm guessing a lot of what you're saying is what's coming in off chat. BK, did you get any of that coming through the chat airways, or can you see?
Nothing in particular.
Yeah. But that's I'm sure that's what people are saying online, because this is what people say, right? And so our goal, and like kind of what we try to talk about and give examples from our work, both sides of the desk, is how this is really possible, to keep the end in mind, that college admission, I contend, can be more like college itself, and done well and done right. It should be more like college itself. It should be about discovery. It should be about friendship, in a way, like relationship with family, relationship with people around you. You know, it should be about staying open. I mean, good college students are typically those who are open-minded, who are willing to test assumptions, who are willing to, you know, maybe start with a hypothesis, but then come to a different ultimate conclusion. And I think that's what the college admission experience really should be also for students, is that there's not this one definitive must-have final answer, one way to do things, but instead like this sort of college student approach to college admission.
I
And so
did
that's what we
get,
want to talk
Rick.
about. Yeah.
Go Orange, teamwork,
Okay.
confusion, and miserable.
There you go. Yeah, so
Miserable.
yeah, people online, people in the room, probably around the same wavelength. So, all right.
So-
Well, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So while we're asking questions, we're gonna run through about 100 and so truths with you tonight, and so get comfortable. So too often when people approach the college admission experience, they think of what 2 questions: how and where, right? Where am I going to go to college? How am I going to get in? But if has anybody read the books Start with Why by Simon Sinek? Oh, if you haven't, you should go read it. After you read our book, but read that book or watch the YouTube video that he does. It's like a 20-minute video, but it's this whole idea of asking why. Like, too often, I think students are kind of on the treadmill of education, right? And they're just kind of it's the next step. It's what's expected of me. It's we're at a great school. We have great resources, and that's kind of what's next. And too often they don't stop to say, okay, why am I doing this? Why do I want to go to college, right? And what do I want out of that experience? And who am I? And why am I doing the things I'm doing in high school, right? If you have a 10th grader or a 9th grader, stopping and asking along the way, why am I doing this? Why am I playing this sport? Or why am I joining this club? Is it just for college? And if it is, should you be doing it? Right? Or what's kind of taking an intentional approach to this rather than I'm going to do this to get into college, or I'm going to figure out where I want to go to college and then fit the rest around that, or I'm going to figure out how I get in. So really starting with this pivotal, kind of this cornerstone question is really important.
Yeah. All right, so the next one, and there are 5 of these, and then we'll just take over questions, BK, from you. But I think one of the problems in college admission is the language. There's a lot of language that I think is somewhat problematic. And one of those is, like, when you hear journalists or see journalists write a lot about this, or even like people myself will come to your school and talk about college admission, they inevitably use the word process. And if you go to Google Images for process, this is what you get. You get a lot of mechanical stuff. Very few actual human beings, right? You can test this for yourself later on Google Images. But if you see human beings, they're not interacting with other human beings. They're like down in a kind of like flickering light basement looking closely at colored liquid because there's like a way to do the process. It's like this sort of formula. And a lot of students, I think, feel that when they talk about college admission, like there is a way to do it. There's a prescribed recipe. I need to make sure I get this grade in this class, or get this test score, or make sure that everything happens to be this way. Or the girl down the street got into the school I want to go to, and this is what she did, so let's follow that, right? And there is a way. There's a particular recipe or secret sauce or something. And you're a green guy, and man, all you want in life is to become purple, right? It's just like you want to just go down and please don't let anybody rust that wheel or put a wrench in the process. What we really hope for your family is that you will actually treat it and think about it, and maybe even talk about it with the word experience instead of process. Because with experiences in our own lives, right, as parents and caregivers and just adults in general, like I think many of the things we look back on that we most enjoy and appreciate and frankly like value are the things we did not prescribe, that we did not orchestrate, that we did not sort of ever expect would have gone the way they did, and yet the way it turned out is actually kind of perfect. And in college admission, I mean, we just put 6,500 admission decisions on the street last Friday, which is why I'm in California, just get as far away as possible. But there's gonna be some turbulence. Like there's gonna be some reroutes. There's gonna be some speed bumps, and maybe that's a deferral. Maybe that's a denial. Maybe that's a wait list. Maybe that's a scholarship's not big enough to make it work. Maybe who knows, right? What's gonna happen? But I do think that if you can look at it as, hey, end in mind, college, let's get prepared for wherever we're going to end up, and let's kind of be excited about the unknown and the things we can't control and the things that, basically we're just going to have to wait and see. Like some of, I think, the anxiety that people will say, or the stress that people will say, is that they can't control it, that there's a lot of waiting, right? I mean, these kids hit submit on these apps and it's like, now what? You know, what's happening? Who's reading it? What are they looking at? What's going to happen? And they got to wait and wait and wait. And that's hard. As humans, we don't like that. We don't want to have to be put in positions where we're waiting on a medical result. We don't know how the job interview is going to go, how these things are going to resolve. But if you look at it as an experience that the excitement of it is what, you know, we don't know, but we're doing this together, it's a shared experience, man, there's a lot of power and possibility in that.
But what I think, if I may, what I think that a lot of parents and students really want to understand about this process is you solve for X. And so if X plus Y equals what, do I get the fat envelope? So you talked about in your book, holistic review process.
Yeah.
And factual, I think, was the other?
Formulaic.
Formulaic,
yeah.
okay, was the other process. Can you explain that?
Yeah.
Can you break that down a little bit for us?
Yeah, and Rick did put that recipe to the secret sauce in the bottom of each of those chairs. So
Okay.
just feel free to check it on your way
For
out.
only those who are here to get that
Exactly.
recipe for the secret sauce on how to get in.
That's right. No, I mean, so I'll talk a little bit about formulaic admission, and you can talk
Okay.
about holistic,
Sure,
because holistic really means college admissions can do whatever they want. And, but formulaic, and it's probably in the minority now, I mean, but is really kind of taking a GPA or taking grades and taking test scores if they have them, and they have a scale. A lot of colleges, especially bigger state universities and things like that, kind of have a scale, and they can look and they can say, okay, you have this GPA and this this test score and correlates, and if you're in this spot, then you're admitted, right? If you we in the book we kind of talk about it as kind of the setting the bar and jumping over it, right? You set the bar at a certain level, and if you can clear that bar, you're in, right? And so that's the formulaic piece. It's really by the numbers. But for more selective schools like Georgia Tech and other schools, there are more applicants that are qualified to go over that bar than there are spots. And so,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, really, I would say, at the end of the day, college admission comes down to two principles: supply and demand, right? Number of apps for number of seats, and then institutional priorities. And that is really how admission decisions are made.
Institutional priorities.
I'll give you a good example. My alma mater, Chapel Hill, right? Public school in North Carolina legislated at 82% must come from the state of North Carolina, all right? Which means that you can have a kid who is from Concord, North Carolina, right? This is a real place. It's outside of Charlotte. And this kid is fine, you know, takes some good classes, does pretty well. He's involved outside the classroom, plays a couple sports. He's nice, you know, treats people pretty well. But there's this other kid, and we'll hat tip New Hampshire, from Concord, New Hampshire, right? So put the
also a place.
yeah, also a place.
Our state
just-
capital, I would say.
Yeah, just putting the emphasis on a different syllable. And now that kid, though, this is an amazing kid. First of all, no person over like 55 has ever walked across the street alone without him being there to help. A couple apps in the App Store, like really getting close to solving COVID. Valedictorian, you know, all this stuff, right?
My son.
So the kid from Concord, North Carolina, a fine and good, bright kid who's nice again, gets into UNC because UNC's admit rate from in-state is 35%. The minority of their applicants, but the majority of their students are North Carolinians. The amazing App Store, COVID-solving valedictorian from Concord does not get in to UNC because 18% of the seats, and yet the vast majority of the applicants are, you know, not from in-state. That is not fair, right? But it is logical because in holistic review, what's happening is you are saying we have X number of seats and these are our goals, right? Here's what we're trying to achieve. We have a new major. We need to fill that. We're trying to increase the number of women who go to our school or men who go to our school.
International
or
students.
International students who go to our school. And these goals drive those decisions. Now, here's the thing about institutional priorities. Like, you can look for clues. You can talk to your counseling. I mean, all the schools who are represented online and here tonight, like have amazing counseling teams who have a depth of experience and a ton of history, and you need to lean on your resources. But even they are not going to know all of the things. Like just 2 weeks ago, Georgia Tech was approved to start a new program in environmental science. Well, we need to fill that environmental science major this year, and yet nobody applied for environmental science.
All right, all the applicants so apply to Georgia Tech.
It's still open.
Environmental
You
science.
just got 400 instant applications.
Bam!
Man.
So, but point being, this year, you know, you're fishing from a certain pool for that major to try to get this thing going. Well, 3 years from now, that environmental science program is probably going to be ranked, it's going to be known, it's going to be popular, it's going to be a lot harder. So you could have a kid who's the brother this year in the applicant pool, who has 2 less AP classes and 30 points lower on the SAT, gets into environmental science, and the sister, who's a nicer person, more APs, higher, does not get in 2 years later. Like, that's just the way it is. Like, that is holistic review. It's the decathlon instead of the high jump, right? It's lots of different factors, and some of those are very humanly judged, not quantitative. In fact, lots of those are not quantitative, right? Because you burn past the numbers really fast. You know, we fly past, you know, lots of kids have good grades, good classes, good test scores. You get into those other things really quick.
Yeah, really looking at the student's story, right?
Yeah.
And yeah.
And these institutional priorities can change from year to year,
Yeah.
or in your case, from week to week.
Yeah, right.
That's right.
I didn't know we were getting a new environmental science class, but I'm responsible for filling
I was
it.
gonna say, wait, aren't you the AVP and you didn't know this? Okay. Good.
Why don't you take this one?
Yeah, so different types of wedges, okay? One time I had, yeah, thank you, appreciate that. One time I had I had one where it was like actually part of a woman's leg and just the wedge, and someone gently suggested I should add different wedges. So I
This
took
is why
away
we have, this is why we have 2 co-authors.
yeah. But if that book
Check
in
on
mine
you.
only, there'd be some sketchy stuff in it. But I took away the woman's leg and added other wedges. So anyway, what we've kind of put our finger on, and I think this is through, you know, Brennan's been on the college side and on the high school side now for a while. I've been on the high school side initially and the college side for a while. Is that we've seen it go really well for families. And I know, BK, you could rattle off tons of people's names, or you look back at these families where you're like, that was, like, they did it right. It was more about the how than the where, you know, and that ended up being a healthy thing, a unifying thing. They learned something about each other, and it went well. And then, of course, we can all tell the flip side of that story where you're like, oof, that did some relational damage, actually, you know, like along the way. And so our hope is that you would kind of like really pay attention to a couple of these. And so the 4 that we kind of highlight, and I won't go through them all too much, are potato wedges, golf. No, they are time, money, communication, and ego. And you can probably figure out how each of those might go, but let me just hit on 2 for tonight or for right now so we can get to other questions. But I think the first one is just time, right? We all, as humans, have a 24-hour slice of pie every day, and we have to figure out how we're going to use that. Sleep a little, eat a little, spend some time with friends, do our work or go to school as students, and then like this small slice of discretionary time that we have. And that says a lot about, you know, who you are and what you put priority on, what you care about, no doubt. But as a family going through college admission, I think it's a lot like buying and selling a house. If you've done that at all recently, like it can be time consuming and all consuming. And if you're not intentional and disciplined about it, it'll creep into every conversation you have. Because all of a sudden you're like looking around at houses, checking the market, freaking out because somebody lowered their price or raised their price or an interest rate moved or whatever. And college admission can do that too. And so what I've found and what we recommend and suggest is, look, it doesn't have to be that way. Don't pick your kid up from tennis practice at 9 p.m. and throw a Notre Dame brochure on their lap, you know? Like, let them come downstairs without asking them if they filled out that application or did that essay. And hold all that and make an agreement that, you know what, I'm not gonna do that to you, but on Sundays from 2 to 3, we're gonna meet at the kitchen table, and that's gonna be our time. All questions are on the table, like, you're gonna respond in multi-syllabic words strung together, called sentences, which I have a 14-year-old son. This is a challenge, right? Like a lot of goods, wells, and no clue. But I get no clues the more recent response. No clue. Like, dude. Anyway, so, but like setting aside that time. And then the other thing, one of the other wedges is money. And I would just say, like, here's the thing about money. It can be uncomfortable to talk about it, but man, it is so important, and the timing of that is so important. And since so many of you said you have juniors, I really think now is the time, because now is a reasonable time, and we talk about conditions, expectations, and limitations. And like, it's a really fair condition to say to a student, I think, as a parent, like, hey, we're willing to pay the equivalent price of any California public plus $10,000 for any other place and no more. Fine to say when they're a junior, like really not cool to say when they're a senior who's been admitted, who's wearing the hoodie, who's posted on Instagram, who's sitting in the office. No, not good, right? And it's also fine to say, like, yeah, we're able to afford X. We're just not willing to pay X. And willingness and ability are oftentimes different, but if you explain it, it's really reasonable to say, yes, we could, but no, we won't, because we don't want to sell our second house. We want to be able to go on vacation. We want to not work till we're 68. Like, fair and reasonable. And kids, I think our kids can handle a lot more than we realize or give them credit for when it comes to money. And so I just think talking about money early and honestly and openly with those type of parameters is a gift to students.
And sometimes contextualizing it, right? So a colleague of mine used to say that, parents, you can kind of describe it to your children like at the beginning of every year, buying a high-end luxury automobile, and then in the spring, driving it off a cliff, right? That's college education. Right? That's a year of college education. I don't know about the driving it off the cliff.
I was thinking, wait, what?
It's the fact that you're taking that money and it's gone, right? And you're investing in something, and so you got to make sure it's the right thing.
Yeah.
Putting it in context. So we'll just fly through these next two. How many people in the room have looked at a college ranking? Come on, be honest. Right? I'm not going to ranking chain you. Don't worry. So if you're looking at rankings, look at what goes into them, right? Like the U.S. News and World Report, probably the most well-known, right? 20% of that is based on reputation, right? So they ask other college presidents and other deans and things like that to say, kind of rank schools, like what's the reputation of this school? Half the time, the person filling that out is the assistant in the president's office, has no clue about the other schools, and just kind of, fires it off and sends it off. You also be amazed at, you probably know this, BK, like the number of kind of colleges that send out gifts and things like that to the other colleges.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, UVM is sending maple syrup and other things to these other college presidents and things like that. It's pretty amazing. But so we talk a lot about rankings in the book and in the workbook too. And we encourage students and families to, if you're quantitative and you work in that way and you need to kind of create hierarchies, then make your own rankings, right? Like figure out the 5, 10, whatever number of criteria that's important to you, right? And then as you visit schools, you can create your own ranking system and say, okay, the study abroad program at this school is a 5 out of 10 for these reasons or whatever. So that way you're creating a ranking system based on the match for you and what's important to you and your values, rather than what some college president or what some, your neighbor or whoever is saying is right for you. So.
Yeah, for sure. All right, last one. This is just like a good Venn diagram for life in general, but definitely for college admission, I think. And so I guess one of the big things is, we said this earlier, like there's just so many pieces that are going to be outside of your knowledge, outside of your control, and that usually makes people a little anxious, especially people who are used to being able to control a lot in life, right, and get a lot of things to go their way. And so this is, again, why stress is sometimes the number one answer on the board for college admission. But let me just kind of reframe this, and I think especially for a lot of the parents in the room, one of the things you can do for your student when they feel a little bit anxious is remind them that they actually control a much bigger part of college admission than they think. Because they focus on just one part. But let me just walk through this real quickly. They get to control where they apply, right? And first of all, please don't let them apply anywhere where they wouldn't actually go. That's just dumb. Like that. Please tell them to, or you give that money to charity or something. Like, don't apply somewhere you're not going to go. Our neighbor just recently got in. I can say this because we're not in the South. Our neighbor just recently got into the University of Tennessee, and I saw her after Thanksgiving. She had gotten into University of Tennessee, and she's like, but it's just the University of Tennessee. I'm like, why'd you apply there? Like, what? First of all, there's a lot of people that would love to go to the University of Tennessee. It's, and there's a lot of opportunity there. But like, if you're talking about it that way, like, why did you apply? That makes no sense. But there's 4,000 colleges and universities in this country. When you look at 2-year, 4-year, for-profit, not-for-profit, all these things. If you apply to 10, let's just say, you've eliminated 3,990, making you far more selective than any college in the country, right? You should be thrilled about every place you apply. That's one, is you get to choose where you apply. Now, there is a brief period of time where you are not in control. There are committee rooms 50 miles from here, 500 miles from here, 5,000 miles from here, where you're not going to be in the room. Don't try to get in the room. Like, that's when people, sometimes from this area, have gone to jail, documentaries get made. Like, we all know what we're talking about here, right?
Ouch.
So if you get in and how much they will give you to go there, not in your control completely, right? So sure, there's a bit of a slice of the pie. But then, and this I believe is the whole goal for parents, and people have asked over the years, I've sat on lots of webinars, lots of panels, and people always say, what's the role of a parent? And what I've kind of come to realize is I believe the role of a parent is exactly what the role of a parent has always been, and the role of a parent continues to be in college admission, and that is to give our kids choices and options. Because we'll, as parents, we'll say lots of things about what we want for our kids, but I really think the truth is we want our kids to have choices and options of who they marry, of where they work, of who they get to spend time with, of what they get to do, right? And that's why we've sacrificed so much for our kids, is to give them choices and options. And in the end, and you guys see this all the time, the seniors right now that are stressed about not getting in anywhere, they're stressed in like Marches, I got in 4 places and now I have to choose, which was the whole goal to begin with, right? And they get to choose, and that they control. And then of course, lastly, like they get to control whenever they show up, wherever they show up, they get to show up in a certain way, and they're in control of that too, of maximizing the opportunities of wherever it is they end up, right? So look, if you look at it that way, they are in 75% of control. Where they apply, where they choose to go, and how they choose to show up. And look, I think most of us, if there was like some little genie in our room, which sounds kind of creepy, I guess, in the morning when we wake up and they're like, I'll give you 75% control of your day. Most of us would take that,
That's
man.
right.
I mean, especially, right? So I think we should be reminded of that.
Can I ask a question about what you just said about the control and applying to all those different schools? It feels like students try to cast a wider net because of the holistic review process in order to land.
Because there's so much uncertainty.
It's so much uncertainty to the
right.
process.
Right.
And so trying to understand that or unpack that
Yeah,
is difficult for kids these days.
no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, so right, like the number of applications that students are submitting, especially at independent schools,
It's gone up.
It's gone up, but I don't think it has to. I think if you do an intentional search and find, I mean, we talk a lot about kind of what a colleague, Barbara Connor at Foxcroft School, talks about 5 first choice colleges, right? If you can find 5 colleges that are your first choice, First of all, if you get in any of them, you get into your first choice, and you tell people you get into your first choice. But also, it kind of backs off this idea that there's one perfect school for you, or there's one school you should be focusing on. And so, I think if you can craft a college list and you start and intentionally plan and do a lot of kind of introspection and research and really do this experience right, then you don't have to apply to 20 schools. Yeah, it is. There's more uncertainty, and if you're applying to just the most selective schools in the country, yes, it's going to be uncertain. But applying to more of those schools is not going to increase your odds, right?
But are we increasing the odds with ED, with REA, with EA?
Are students increasing their odds? At some schools, yeah. I mean, at some schools, the early decision, as you know, early decision admit rate is almost double that of the regular. There's a caveat with everything, right? You always have to look beyond the numbers, right? Because that includes, right, recruited athletes, and that includes some of the sending programs like Questbridge and Posse and things like that. So I think whenever you hear a number like admit rate or that kind of thing, you have to figure out who you are in that, who your student is in that number, right? That's a general number for all the students. But does that mean that the admit rate, if an admit rate is 30%, does that mean it's a 30% admit rate for a student from Marlborough? Maybe not. Or maybe so, depending who that student is. So I think you always need to kind of take it down a level.
Yeah, and this is again a good opportunity to say lean on your college counseling team, because you guys have historical data on this. I mean, you have people that are coming in and talking to you all the time from various places. You guys go out to all these schools to learn more about them, and that is an invaluable resource.
You talked earlier about parents and how parents take a back seat to the process. And my colleagues and I, we always talk about spending an hour talking about the process with your child, not to bombard them with the process. We call it Taco Tuesday. So have Taco Tuesday, sit down at your table for an hour from 6 to 7, ask your questions, your kid, of your kid, and then the kid can ask questions of the parents. For us in the state of California, we don't want parents to lock their kid in the car, drive to Palm Springs on a Friday at 5 o'clock and talk college the entire way.
Yeah.
That would be just horrible.
Masochistic. Yeah.
But the fact that parents love their children, and you talk about this in your book, about how people love their kids, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by parents should not reach out to schools and contact you as the dean of admission and ask, why didn't my kid get into the institution?
Yeah.
You have this holistic review process. Brent, he's a top-notch kid. He's done all these wonderful things. He's got a great GPA. Why didn't you admit him? Should parents be involved in that way?
Well, I mean, I think that
No. I'll just
the short answer.
cut them off. Yeah.
I know it's the short answer, but I guess part of the reason that we wanted to focus and start with this concept of parents love their kids is I get it. I have 2 kids of my own, right? And I mean,
So how are you going to react?
Well, I mean, I think my point is, especially, because we're hoping that kids and parents are reading this book, right? And we, at the end of every chapter, have discussion questions for them to kind of walk through. And what we're trying to say in that is, for kids especially, give your parents a break sometimes for acting a little whacked out, a little crazy, a little neurotic. It is emotional. There's so much going on. There's money on the line. There's deadlines on the line. There's also that sort of concept that life's gonna change. There's gonna be a new chapter in our family's life. It is emotional, and that is all reasonable. So this idea that parents love their kids explains a lot to me when I talk to our younger staff, many of whom are in their early 20s and stuff, especially as I said, we just released admission decisions, and we have to coach them on what volley is going to come back in email and in calls, and it helps to frame it by saying, when people call and they're upset because my kid had a 1490 and took BC calculus, and how can you possibly defer them? just step back for a second and say, where's that coming from? It's actually coming from a place of love. It may disguise itself in some expletives, and, whatever, but like, they're not crazy. They just love their kids, and that is not a reasonable reaction, but that's the concept, right? That's behind it.
Well, and a perfect example, so my son just graduated high school, and last summer when he was between his junior and senior year, obviously I know enough to be dangerous, and I tried to keep my mouth shut, and kind of limit it to once a week if we were going to talk about it, let him bring it up. But we were out on a walk last summer, and we started out on the walk. We probably walk every couple of days, and I started to ask something about college, and he just started laughing. And I said, "What?" And he said, "Every time we go for a walk, we're right into college. We're right into college. You ask about college." And I didn't even realize I was doing it. But just having that open communication, I think, from the beginning about how you're going through this experience is really important. So you can have that back and forth, and your children can check you, and you can check your children. But just having those honest conversations.
Yeah, I mean, it does go back to like, what's the role of a parent? And like, I feel like a lot of times it's this idea that, and y'all live closer to the ocean than I do, so you probably should catch me on my nautical terms here, but I feel like, for the parent, a big part of it is giving perspective. Like, I don't think it's reasonable to say the kid fully drives the process. I don't know. I think all of our kids, like, they are busy and they do sometimes need some prodding. That's not crazy. So I'm not saying leave them alone and see what happens, I think the idea is like, the kid should be with a steering wheel talking about where they'd like to go and what they're interested in, and the parents should be up in like the crow's nest looking out and saying like, I see an iceberg, we were just at Pepperdine today. We drove from Santa Barbara and we went through Pepperdine, and like, I can just imagine a family conversation where a kid's like, wow, Mom, I'd love to go to Pepperdine, and I can imagine Mom saying like, yeah, honey, Malibu looks really great. It costs $80,000 a year, like,
And
iceberg.
they're throwing the anchor in, and yeah.
And like, okay, like, we could do that. This goes back to conditions and limitations. Like, if it comes down to 32, we could do that. Like, that's the concept. It's like kind of coaching, kind of perspective. I think that's the better way to go than grabbing the wheel and heading in a certain way.
But parents should be involved in the process.
Absolutely.
And basically, that's what you're saying. That's what you've said in the book.
That's right.
As well. It's
Yeah.
just where they're involved in the process.
Right.
I think that, and I'll get back to transparency in a minute, but parents should have open dialogue with their sons and daughters from the very beginning when the college process starts. It's not the point where the parent calls the college counselor and say, "Don't tell Brennan that I'm calling you."
Right.
Yeah.
But what I want to say is, he can't go there.
Right. And can you send that message?
Can you let him know
Yeah.
that's not possible because we don't have that money?
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and also I think the family piece and that this can be fun. This can be exciting,
Can it?
right? Yes. And it doesn't have to be, should we have this conversation, shouldn't we? Some of my fondest memories of times with my parents were college visits and, like staying in some shady hotel with my dad in upstate New York, and like, just I have these great memories of it. And yeah, there were stressful points of the experience, like we were using typewriters, right? And like trying to align all the, but
Man, you're old.
but it can be really, it can be a time to come together, right? And to create great memories and to kind of dream about the future.
One thing you said though, BK, there was this idea of like a conversation. Like, I think any relationship, if you're hiding something from someone else in the relationship, that's a red flag. The other thing is like pronouns are a good example.
Oh, yeah, you talk about that in the book.
Like, look, if you're
pronoun
saying
test.
something like, our first choice is Vanderbilt, like it might be a little too involved. Right? Yeah, it might be time to go for a
We
while.
are
right?
we are taking the SAT this
We
weekend.
get that a lot. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We're working on our application.
I mean, like, we did go to the playground together when we were 4 and 5 years old, but like, we're not going to Vanderbilt together. Like, we're not rooming together and, you know, like,
Yeah.
moving fans around and stuff.
So I have a couple other questions. One, I want to circle back around to the institutional priority
Yeah.
thing. It's how do you learn about institutional priorities?
Yeah.
Is this something that you encourage your staff to kind of share
Yeah.
with college counselors, kind of share with parents when you give the admissions presentation? Our institutional priority this year is
Right.
is to admit every student from Marlborough.
Sorry for, I'm gonna stop laughing.
See that?
in a
He tried to get
second.
him in a trance there.
Yeah. Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes and no. No, it's not the Marlborough piece. No. I would say yes. There are ways to. Yes, we talk about on some level institutional priorities, and sometimes those are evidenced through, for instance, on the Common Application, schools will get to determine what they want their supplemental questions to be. In some cases, institutional priorities kind of shine through in those supplemental questions. You can sometimes see them. Yes, if you listen to a college talk about some of the things that they're building buildings on or programs that they're opening, like those are institutional priorities. Like we talk a lot at Georgia Tech about our whole like accelerator, incubator, you know, like corporate connection stuff. Well, yeah, that is also somewhat reflective of the fact that we are looking for students who have a little of that kind of entrepreneurial spirit in a way that maybe another school wouldn't talk about it that way. So yes and no.
And you can also, I mean, you can go on and read the school's mission, right? You can get a lot out of that. You can often go on and you know, Google, you know, Georgia Tech strategic plan and see what's on, you know, in their kind of 5-year strategic plan and get institutional priorities through that.
Yep.
But also ask, right? Like ask the admission office. Some will tell you, some won't. I mean,
Right.
some are really transparent and will say, yeah, you know, these are a couple things that are really
Yeah.
important to us this year.
I was in Colorado on a panel not that long ago with one of the people who's from a private school in Pennsylvania, and he straight up said, like, yeah, we're trying to increase the number of students from Colorado. I mean, you know, so like to your point of ask,
Right.
like, yeah,
Can't hurt.
right.
Mhm. Another question's come through, and the person asked, "Can you please address how you advise coming up with reach, target, and safety schools?" But let me first say there are no safety schools.
Likely.
We call them likely schools. Absolutely. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's leaning on your counselors and kind of
Every school's different. Mhm.
That's true.
Mhm.
Yeah, it depends.
I mean,
right?
which is reach, which is possible, which is likely.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on the school, but you know, it's looking at the kind of where your profile is compared to their average admitted student profile, right? So they'll publish kind of their average student admitted profile testing and GPA and things like that. And you know, if you are right there within their range, that's a target school. It's a mid-range school.
Mhm.
If your profile is well above that, it's a likely school. I mean, in terms of reach schools or uber reach schools, you know, any school that has a single-digit admit rate is automatically go into the reach category, right? But then you know, this is the answer for anything in college admission and that's it depends,
Depends.
right? And I mean, depending on what state you're from, like the institutional priorities. I mean, you might be a likely student if you live in Nebraska, right, and you're applying to some place in the Northeast. Much more, and the same student with the same profile living in Massachusetts, it's going to be a reach school, right? And so factoring all those things in.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You want to add anything to that?
Well, I think the only thing I would say is it's a challenging time right now because things are changing rapidly and quickly. Let me give you a quick example. I mean, especially coming out of the pandemic. we are really rebuilding a lot of our predictive model for who's going to say yes. I mean, like, because mobility has shifted a little bit, maybe because of health issues, maybe because of family, you know, kind of rethinking of like just life as so many people did during the pandemic. Yield rates have really varied. And so this is tough, right? Because I think absolutely your best resource is your in-house school counselors who have historical data, and historical data is always worth reviewing with a serious caveat, right? Knowing that things are shifting. Like, I mean, for Georgia Tech, just as another example, like 10,000 more students applied last year than 2 years before. But then like the yield for our in-state students went down 4 percentage points over that same time, but up 4 percentage points from out of state, which means that like we don't know what the hell is going on, right? And we're rebuilding a model. And so like I worked at Wake Forest, and I'll just start naming names because whatever, it's late and I'm tired. And when I worked at Wake Forest, we waitlisted the shit out of some kids, man. You know, and I'm not saying they still do that, but we would build a wait list bigger, 3 times bigger than our overall admitted class. And I remember thinking, I will never do that. We are going to be we're going to look at the data, we're going to figure this out, we're not going to unnecessarily waitlist kids. You know, and last year I was like, we need to protect ourselves. Like, I need to make sure that we not just make the class, but get the little numbers within the big number, right? The institutional priorities, where I can say, you know, that we hit this, right? And so we upped our wait list. And I hate this even more because it's like the 8th level of purgatory, but like we held kids on deep into the summer. And you guys, I'm guessing you're seeing this because never in my life have I seen Stanford take a kid off a wait list in June, and that was happening. And so it's an ecosystem, right? It's a trickle down. If one school takes a kid off the wait list and you lose, well, you're rebuilding that. We call this melt, right? All this stuff is shifting. And so this idea of likely, foundation, reach, all this, like, it's helpful to get a sense of, you know, like you said, look at history, look at profiles and all that, but you just need to understand, like, even your counseling team who's doing their absolute best job to be diligent about this is also kind of playing catch up right now, as we are, even on our side, because year to year things are changing and there is a shift that's occurring. It makes it, I think, back to this idea that it is not a process. It is an experience, and you have to embrace that.
And to know it's not linear. There's no one right way to do it.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Questions from the audience? I'm sorry, I keep ignoring. Yes.
Hi, okay, I have a student athlete. What have you seen in the experience, the changes, especially after COVID, with how you're working with the coaches, the whole student portal that became heavily important after COVID? Like, what have you seen, and what tips or tidbits could you share?
Oh, well, it definitely, back to it depends. Like, it depends if we're talking D1 or not.
Right.
But
right.
if we're talking D1, so, and it also kind of depends on the sport, to be honest with you. But I gotta pick something here. So, we'll go football, Division I football.
Does Georgia Tech have football?
It depends on how
depends on the year.
It's
I'm gonna get
a lot
hurt
for that
one.
question. So I'm not, no comment. Yes. But so a couple of things. I mean, you have to work through the coaches, right?
Right.
The way this works is that they bring us what we call a pre-cert.
Okay.
And a pre-cert is essentially grades, and in the case of Georgia Tech, also test scores, because that is something that we require.
Right.
But it'll depend on the school. Regardless, a pre-cert is something that an admission office looks at and says, this kid is NCAA eligible, this kid, if everything is accurate and this continues on this trend, we would offer that kid admit. That allows you to sign an NLI, a National Letter of Intent,
Right.
and then often at that point, we get an application. A whole different, that is a process.
Yeah.
That's a process, right? Because that is X plus Y leads to
Okay.
a more known outcome. this also is a challenge, and the portal has absolutely changed things. And even Major League Baseball and the way that works, because we have to way over offer and like really run some risk because the pros take some of our signed prospects. And you guys have seen this, I'm sure, in many sports at many schools. Like sometimes those promises, sometimes those seemingly done deals fall through, and the portal has exacerbated that. So I guess what I would say is, again, partnership here between counseling team and coaches, and knowing, eyes open, that at the end of the day, you have to take care of your student and your family, and sometimes that means, and this is happening more and more, like having backup plans in a way that maybe you didn't as much in the past. That's at least my take from my seat. And I work pretty closely with athletics.
Okay, thank you.
Sometimes too closely.
Other questions?
Other questions? Yeah.
So I have a younger student, 8th grade, and of course it's on the top of my mind just because I'm looking ahead and she's my first one. And what are you looking for? Like, what should the kids be doing extracurricularly? Obviously, like, if they're capable of taking AP classes, they should be taking AP classes. But extracurricularly, is it a lot of things, or concentrate on one single thing and do it well? Or what if they're not, gonna be the NCAA, athlete? Can you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of the perennial question. I mean, should a student be kind of edgy or like pointed in one specific area, kind of going all in one area, or should they be well-rounded? And yes is the answer, right? Not one or the other, right? So can you imagine if Georgia Tech was all just students who were pointy, who were just like focused on one area, or any college, right? That would be a really tough place to be. So colleges are really looking at students who have developed a passion or something they're really excited about and have gone deep into that, but they're also looking for students who are just interested in a wide variety of things and have been involved and have been engaged, and we talk about this in the book a little, but it's really less about the activity and more about what impact they've had, what kind of involvement they've had, what kind of help me out here. Influence, and on others, right? On kind of the common good, or on that activity, and how that is playing out for them. Like how they talk about that, and how they've taken advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that this has shifted, I think, again, because our culture has shifted. Like, when many of us grew up, like, maybe you played an instrument or you played a sport, and, like, you could do that in a season, and you had the luxury, and it was just commonplace to do a different sport in a different season. Again, I have a 14-year-old son. He plays soccer. He plays soccer year-round. He plays soccer in the fall. He has futsal in the winter. He has spring soccer. And now there's these camps and all this other stuff going on. Like, that has shifted. Our culture has changed. And whatever your son or daughter does, whoever that is running it wants more of their time. They want them to specialize, right? So, but let me just say, like, for us this year, our class size goal, 3,650. All right, 3,650 is the goal for the class. You will find many well-rounded students in there, and you will find some kids that are just like all in on certain things. But what we have in our rubric, and I think that a lot of admission people use lots of words to get to this question, is, will this student be missed? I really think fundamentally that is what colleges are asking. Will this student be missed? And maybe they'll be missed by lots of people, right, who in the well-rounded case. And sometimes it's like the kid that runs the lights in the theater. And that theater club sponsor is freaking petrified that kid is gonna, they might not put on another show in the next year, because that's the one kid that can do it, right? And they're pointy for lights in the theater and all of that kind of stuff, right? So I think at the end of the day, especially 8th grade, 9th grade, honestly even 10th grade, like, just be a good high school student, man. Go to class.
Try it out.
Do well in school. Take what you can handle and set a good foundation. And outside the classroom, just get involved. See what you like. Have that impact and influence, and don't worry about, be a good high school student, because again, Most colleges in this country will use a lot of words to get to this, but at the end of the day, they want good high school students, period.
That's great. Thank you both.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate it, and we really appreciate you guys being here, all the way from the East Coast and from the South. Thank you for spending some time with Marlborough.
Yeah.
Sorry we didn't get to all your questions, but definitely want to thank our panelists. That's a wrap, you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
You are.
I want to. We can do more. I enjoyed the CCN. Oh, yeah, the CGN. Yeah, CGI. Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to do some more stuff with you.
Oh, yeah.
Fun.
He's all right.
Definitely be fun.
I heard.